When I asked about my grandson's christening, my daughter-in-law replied, "It was last Sunday. Family only. We didn't want any complications." 3 weeks later, she sent me a text. "Transfer the medical money. It's urgent." I replied, "What medical money? I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Harold, and at 64 years old, I thought I understood how life worked. I'd spent 38 years as a construction foreman in the Greater Toronto area, building homes for other families while trying to hold my own together. I was wrong about understanding anything. It was a Saturday morning in late November when my neighbor Diane knocked on my door. She was holding her phone, her face bright with that particular excitement people get when they're about to share news they assume you already know. "Harold, the photos from Oliver's christening are absolutely precious. That church in Oakville looked stunning. You must be over the moon." I stared at her, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Christening. Oliver was my grandson, 6 months old, my only grandchild. She turned the phone toward me, and there it was. My son Derek in a navy suit, his wife Vanessa in a cream-colored dress, holding Oliver in a traditional christening gown. The church was filled with people, maybe 40 guests, all smiling for the camera. In one photo, I could see Vanessa's parents standing proudly beside the baptismal font. My legs felt unsteady. When was this? Last Sunday, according to the post. "Look at little Oliver's face. He barely cried at all," Vanessa wrote. Last Sunday. My grandson had been christened last Sunday, and I was sitting at home watching hockey, completely unaware that the most important religious ceremony of his young life was happening without me. I thanked Diane, somehow closed the door, and immediately called Derek. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. My hands were trembling as I found Vanessa's number instead. She answered on the second ring, her voice that particular kind of cheerful that always felt rehearsed. "Oh, hi Harold. What's up?" "What's up? I just found out from my neighbor that Oliver was christened last week. What's up is that nobody told me my grandson was being baptized." There was a pause. Then Vanessa sighed, the way you might sigh at a child asking an obvious question. "Harold, it was a small ceremony. Family only. I am family. I'm his grandfather." I meant immediate family. People who are actually involved in Oliver's daily life. We didn't want any complications. Complications. That word hit me like a punch to the chest. I stood there in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught Derek how to make pancakes when he was 7, where we'd sat together after his mother, Margaret, passed away 5 years ago, both of us too broken to speak, and now I was a complication. Vanessa. I'm his grandfather, his only grandfather. Look, Harold, it's not personal. My parents helped plan everything, and they have certain expectations about these events. It needed to be cohesive. Cohesive. I wasn't cohesive enough to witness my grandson's christening. I thought about my small house in Mississauga, my 12-year-old pickup truck, my pension from the construction union. I'd never been wealthy, but I'd worked honestly my entire life. I'd raised Derek alone after Margaret died, making sure he finished university, helping him with the down payment on his first condo. Where's Derek? I want to talk to him. He's busy with Oliver. The christening was exhausting for everyone, and we're still recovering from the reception. We held it at the Granite Club. Beautiful venue. The Granite Club. I knew that place. Exclusive membership, $1,000 dinners. The kind of establishment where people like me parked cars, not attended parties. After Vanessa hung up, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the wall where I'd hung Oliver's newborn photo, the one Derek had texted me from the hospital. In that photo, Derek looked proud and terrified and happy all at once. He'd called me Dad 3 times in 30 seconds, asking if Oliver looked healthy, if his color was good, if I thought he had Margaret's eyes. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I'd seen Oliver exactly 4 times. Each visit was brief, scheduled around Vanessa's preferences, and always at their house in Oakville, where I felt like a guest rather than family. Vanessa would hover nearby, checking her watch, mentioning appointments they had to get to. I started thinking back, trying to understand when things had changed. When Derek and Vanessa got engaged 3 years ago, she'd been pleasant enough, polite, but looking back, I could see the pattern forming even then. The way she'd change the subject whenever I mentioned our family traditions. The way she'd laugh at my stories about Derek's childhood, but not the warm kind of laugh. The way she'd started calling me Harold instead of Dad about 6 months after the wedding. I remembered one dinner at their house where Vanessa had looked at my work boots by the door and asked if I'd like some slippers instead. We just had the floors refinished, she'd explained. They're Italian hardwood. Derek had said nothing. He'd just handed me a pair of Guess slippers and avoided my eyes. The gradual exclusion had been so subtle I hadn't noticed it happening. The man who had raised Derek, who had worked double shifts to pay for his hockey equipment and his university tuition, who had held him while he sobbed at his mother's funeral, was now too rough around the edges for their Italian hardwood floors. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the christening photos, about Oliver's little face, about the empty chair where I should have been sitting. But what hurt most was realizing this wasn't an oversight. They had planned the ceremony, sent invitations, booked the church, and the reception venue. Through all of that, at no point had anyone thought Oliver's grandfather deserved to be there. The text message came 3 weeks after I learned about the christening. 3 weeks of unanswered calls to Derek and short, dismissive responses from Vanessa. I was in my garage, trying to fix a shelf that had been broken for months, when my phone buzzed. It was from Vanessa. Transfer the medical money. It's urgent. Oliver needs it. I stared at the screen, reading it 3 times. No greeting. No explanation. Just a demand, phrased like I was expected to know exactly what she meant. I typed back, "What medical money?" Her response came immediately. "The monthly amount, for Oliver's specialists. It's due tomorrow." I called Derek directly. This time, he answered. "Dad, hi." His voice was strained, the way it used to get when he was a teenager and I'd caught him sneaking in past curfew. "Derek, Vanessa just texted me about medical money. What's she talking about?" There was a long pause. "Dad, I thought you knew. We've been having some issues with Oliver's health. Nothing serious, but he needs to see specialists, pediatric neurologists, developmental experts. It's expensive." My heart clenched. "Is Oliver okay? What's wrong with him?" "He's fine, Dad, really. It's just precautionary stuff. But the appointments aren't covered by provincial health, and we've been struggling to keep up with the costs. Derek, I haven't sent any money for medical expenses." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Derek spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, you've been sending us $1,500 every month since June. Vanessa said you offered to help with Oliver's care." I felt the blood drain from my face. $1,500 a month since June. That was 6 months. $9,000 total. "Derek, I never offered anything like that. I never sent any money. But the transfers. Vanessa showed me the confirmations." "What confirmations?" "I'm telling you, I haven't sent a single dollar." There was muffled conversation on the other end, Vanessa's voice sharp and fast, Derek's responses quieter. Then Derek came back on. "Dad, I need to go. We'll talk about this later." He hung up before I could respond. I went immediately to my computer and logged into my bank account. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the transaction history. What I found made my stomach turn. There they were. 6 transfers of $1,500 each, dating back to June. But I hadn't authorized them. The transfers were set up as automatic payments, scheduled on the 15th of each month, going to an account I didn't recognize. Then I remembered, back in May, I'd had Vanessa help me set up online banking. She'd been visiting with Oliver, and I'd mentioned I was having trouble with the new app. She'd sat with me for 20 minutes, clicking through screens, showing me how to check my balance and view statements. She'd been so patient, so helpful. She must have set up the automatic transfers while I was distracted by the baby. I called the bank immediately. The fraud department confirmed that the transfers had been set up from my device, using my login credentials. Unless I could prove someone else had accessed my account without permission, there was nothing they could do. $9,000. Money from my pension, from the savings I'd been building for emergencies, for home repairs that my aging house desperately needed. I'd been robbed by my own daughter-in-law. The next call I made was to Derek. He didn't answer, so I left a message. "Derek, I need you to come over. Tonight. This is serious." He showed up 3 hours later. Alone. He looked tired, older than his 32 years, with dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Dad, I don't understand what's happening." "Sit down, Derek." I showed him the bank statements, walked him through what I'd discovered. As I talked, I watched his face go through several emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like fear. "Dad, there has to be an explanation. Vanessa wouldn't do something like this. The transfers started right after she helped me set up my banking app. That's just a coincidence." "Is it?" "Derek, I wasn't invited to my grandson's christening. Your wife told me I was a complication. And now I find out someone has been stealing money from my account for 6 months. She didn't steal it. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding about the medical expenses." "What medical expenses, Derek? What's actually wrong with Oliver?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "The specialists." "What specialists? What are their names? What conditions are they treating?" The silence told me everything. Derek didn't know because there were no specialists. There were no medical problems. It had all been a story to justify stealing from me. "Derek, I need you to be honest with me. Where has the money been going?" He put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I don't know, Dad. I swear I don't know. Vanessa handles all our finances. She said you offered to help, that you wanted to contribute to Oliver's care. I thought it was your way of being involved, even though—" He stopped. "Even though what? Even though I'm not allowed to actually see my grandson?" "Dad, that's not fair, isn't it? How many times have I asked to visit in the last 6 months? How many times has Vanessa had some reason why it wasn't a good time?" He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I'd been kept at arm's length, allowed just enough contact to maintain the illusion of a relationship while being systematically excluded from anything meaningful. "I want to see the medical bills, Derek. I want to see documentation for every specialist appointment, every treatment, every diagnosis." I'd have to ask Vanessa. "No. You're his father. You should have access to your own son's medical records." Derek left that night looking like a man whose world was crumbling beneath him. I felt sorry for him. I did. But I also felt something I hadn't expected. Anger. Not at Vanessa, though there was plenty of that. Anger at Derek for allowing himself to be so controlled that he didn't even know where $9,000 of his father's money had gone. The confrontation came 4 days later. I was making dinner when I heard car doors slam outside, then aggressive knocking on my front door. I opened it to find Vanessa standing there, her face red with fury, Derek behind her looking like he wanted to disappear. "How dare you?" Vanessa said, pushing past me into my house. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" "I didn't accuse anyone." I showed Derek the bank statements. "Those transfers were a gift. You offered to help with Oliver's expenses." "I never offered any such thing, and you know it. You're a confused old man. Maybe you're forgetting things." She looked around my modest living room with obvious disdain. "Maybe living alone in this place isn't good for your mental health." The threat was barely veiled. She was setting the groundwork to claim I was mentally incompetent. "I'm not confused, Vanessa. I know exactly what happened. You set up automatic transfers when you helped me with my banking app. You've been stealing $1,500 a month for the past 6 months. That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Derek finally spoke. "Vanessa, maybe we should just explain about the money. If there's been a misunderstanding—" "There's nothing to explain, Derek." Vanessa's voice was sharp. "Your father offered to help, and now he's changing his story because he's upset about the christening." "I was upset about the christening because I wasn't invited. But that's a separate issue from fraud." Vanessa laughed, a cold sound. "Fraud? Please. You gave us that money willingly. If you want to claim otherwise, go ahead. Prove it. The automatic transfers were set up without my knowledge or consent. That's identity theft. It's your word against mine. And let me tell you something, Harold." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You want to make accusations? Fine. But think carefully about what happens next. Because I decide when you see Oliver. I decide if you see Oliver." There it was. The real threat. Not about the money, but about my grandson. She was willing to use a 6-month-old child as leverage to keep me silent about being robbed. "Vanessa, are you seriously threatening to keep me from my grandson if I report this?" "I'm saying that family relationships require trust, and you've made it very clear you don't trust me." "I wonder why." Derek stepped between us. "Okay, Everyone needs to calm down. Dad, maybe there's been a miscommunication. Vanessa, maybe we should show Dad the receipts for the specialist appointments. Vanessa's expression flickered, just for a second. It was the look of someone who'd been caught, but wasn't ready to admit it. The receipts are at home. I'd have to look for them. Then go look. I'll wait. Harold, I'm not going to jump through hoops just because you've decided to make accusations. I sat down in my chair, suddenly exhausted. Then answer me one question. What is Oliver's medical condition? The one that requires specialists, not covered by OHIP? She opened her mouth, and I watched her scramble for an answer. It's complicated. A variety of developmental concerns that, what's the name of the condition? There isn't one specific name. That's why we need the specialists to... What are the names of the doctors? I don't remember off the top of my head. You've been taking your son to specialists for 6 months, and you don't remember a single doctor's name? Derek was watching this exchange with growing horror on his face. I could see him putting pieces together, pieces he'd probably refused to look at for a long time. Vanessa, he said slowly, just tell Dad the names of Oliver's doctors. Derek, I don't appreciate being interrogated. It's not an interrogation. It's a simple question. The room went silent. Vanessa looked at Derek, then at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. The pretense was crumbling, and she knew it. Fine. You want the truth? There are no medical specialists. Oliver is perfectly healthy. Derek's voice was barely audible. Then where has the money been going? Our mortgage, Derek. Our $800,000 mortgage on the house you wanted in Oakville. The house your salary can't cover since you lost your job 8 months ago. Derek looked like he'd been slapped. I didn't know you were using Dad's money for the mortgage. Someone had to keep us from losing the house. Your father has money sitting in the bank doing nothing. We needed it. I made sure we got it. By stealing, I said. By doing what was necessary for my family. I'm part of your family too. Vanessa laughed again. And this time, there was no warmth in it at all. Are you? Because family shows up, Harold. Family contributes. What have you contributed? You came to the hospital when Oliver was born, and you visited maybe 4 times since. You sit here in this little house with your pension checks and your union benefits while we're struggling to maintain the kind of life Oliver deserves. The kind of life you chose. Nobody forced you to buy a house you can't afford. We shouldn't have to struggle. Derek comes from a family with assets. You have this house, free and clear. You have savings. Why should we suffer when you have more than you need? I stared at her, finally understanding. In Vanessa's mind, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, an asset to be exploited for their benefit, but kept at a distance so I wouldn't interfere with the image they were trying to project. I want you to leave my house, I said quietly. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. Get out. Derek stood frozen, looking between me and his wife. I could see the conflict on his face, the years of conditioning battling against the truth he'd just witnessed. Derek, we're leaving, Vanessa said. Maybe I should stay and talk to Dad. Derek. Now. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Shame. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow. They left, Vanessa's heels clicking angrily on my driveway. I watched their Mercedes SUV back out and disappear down the street, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For months, I'd been walking on eggshells, trying to maintain a relationship with my grandson while being systematically excluded and exploited. I'd blamed myself, wondered what I'd done wrong, questioned whether I was being too sensitive. Now I knew. I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. That night, I did something I should have done months ago. I called my brother Frank in Edmonton. Harry, good to hear from you. How's little Oliver? Frank, I need advice. I told him everything. The christening, the fraud, the confrontation. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally swearing under his breath. Harry, you need to report this to the police. She's my daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandson. She's also a thief who stole $9,000 from you. If I report her, I'll never see Oliver again. You're barely seeing him now. And brother, if you let this go, it's only going to get worse. People like Vanessa don't stop. They escalate. After I hung up, I spent the next several hours researching elder financial abuse. What I found was sobering. There were entire organizations dedicated to helping seniors who had been exploited by family members. Stories from people in their 60s, 70s, 80s who had lost everything to children and spouses they trusted. The pattern was always the same. It started small, reasonable requests for help with legitimate-sounding expenses. Then it escalated. The requests became demands. The demands became theft. And always, there was emotional manipulation. The threat of losing contact with grandchildren. The implication that refusing to comply made you a bad parent, a bad grandparent, selfish, and uncaring. I also learned something that made me sit very still for a long time. In Ontario, elder financial abuse was a criminal offense. What Vanessa had done, setting up automatic transfers without my consent, lying about the purpose of the money, threatening me with loss of access to my grandson, all of it was textbook abuse. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The letter arrived by courier the following week. Vanessa had hired a lawyer. I read it sitting at my kitchen table, my hands steady, even as my heart raced. The letter claimed I had verbally agreed to provide financial support for my grandson's medical care, that I was now reneging on my commitment, and that any claims of fraud were defamatory. It demanded I cease making accusations and continue providing the agreed-upon monthly support. The threat was explicit. If I refused, they would seek a court order limiting my contact with Oliver, citing my erratic behavior and concerning mental state as evidence that I posed a risk to my grandson's well-being. I called a lawyer of my own that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she specialized in elder law. Mr. Morrison, what you're describing is financial abuse, pure and simple. The automatic transfers without consent, the fabricated medical expenses, the threats regarding your grandchild. This is a textbook case. What can I do? You have several options. You can report this to the police and potentially pursue criminal charges. You can file a civil suit to recover the stolen funds. And most importantly, you can document everything for potential custody proceedings. Custody proceedings? If your daughter-in-law follows through on her threat to limit your contact with Oliver, you have the right to petition for grandparent visitation rights. Ontario courts take these matters seriously, especially when there's evidence of manipulation. I spent the next week gathering documentation, bank statements, text messages, the letter from Vanessa's lawyer. I wrote out a detailed timeline of everything that had happened, every exclusion, every lie, every threat. And then something unexpected happened. Derek called me. Dad, can I come over? Alone? He arrived an hour later, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. He'd lost weight. His clothes were wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in days. Dad, I need to tell you some things. Things I should have told you a long time ago. We sat in my living room, and Derek started talking about how Vanessa had convinced him to cut back on contact with me shortly after they got married, about how she'd told him I was overbearing, too working class for her family's standards, an embarrassment in social situations, about how she'd gradually taken control of their finances, their social calendar, their entire life. I didn't see it happening, Dad. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. She made everything seem so reasonable. We were building a life together. We had to make sacrifices. We had to focus on what mattered. And I didn't matter. He wiped his eyes. You always mattered, Dad. But somewhere along the way, I let Vanessa convince me that having a relationship with you was optional. That you'd always be there when I finally had time. What changed? I confronted her about the money. Really confronted her. Not just asking questions. I went through our bank statements, our mortgage payments, everything. Dad, she's been lying to me for years. The money she took from you was just the tip of the iceberg. She's been hiding debt, making purchases I knew nothing about, living a double life financially. I'm sorry, Derek. Don't be sorry. I'm the one who should be apologizing. I let her keep you away from Oliver. I let her exclude you from the christening. I let her steal from you and then threatened you when you found out. I was a coward. You were manipulated. That's not an excuse. I'm 32 years old. I should have seen what was happening. We talked for hours that night. Derek told me about the fights he and Vanessa had been having, about her threats to take Oliver and move back to her parents' house if he didn't fall in line, about the way she'd isolated him from his friends, his colleagues, anyone who might challenge her control. I'm filing for divorce, Dad. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I asked the only question that mattered. What about Oliver? I'm going to fight for custody. Full custody, if I can get it. My lawyer thinks I have a good case, especially with the financial fraud and the documentation you've been putting together. Vanessa won't make it easy. No, she won't. But Dad, I can't raise my son in a house where lying and manipulation are normal. I can't let him grow up thinking it's okay to treat people the way she treated you. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. The divorce proceedings lasted nearly a year. It was ugly. Vanessa fought for everything, made accusations about Derek's mental health, tried to claim I was a dangerous influence on Oliver. She produced character witnesses who testified that I was difficult and unstable. But the evidence told a different story. The bank statements showing the fraudulent transfers, the texts where she'd threatened me, the documentation of every time she'd prevented me from seeing my grandson, the testimony from Patricia Chen about the patterns of elder financial abuse. In the end, Derek was awarded primary custody of Oliver. Vanessa got supervised visitation every other weekend. The court also ordered her to repay the $9,000 she'd stolen from me, plus legal fees. On the day the divorce was finalized, Derek brought Oliver to my house for the first time since the christening. My grandson was almost 2 years old now, walking and babbling and discovering the world with the pure joy that only toddlers possess. I sat on my living room floor and watched him play with the wooden blocks I'd bought, the same kind of blocks Derek had played with 30 years ago. And I cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming feeling of finally being allowed to be a grandfather. Dad, Derek said, sitting down beside me, I'm so sorry. For everything. I know you are. I wasted so much time. Time we could have had together. All of us. We have time now. That's what matters. It's been 2 years since then. Derek and Oliver live in Mississauga now, just 15 minutes from my house. I see my grandson 3 or 4 times a week. I've taught him how to use a hammer, how to identify birds at the feeder, how to make pancakes the way I taught his father. Derek is doing well. He found a new job, rebuilt his credit, started over in a smaller house that he can actually afford. He's dating someone now, a woman named Sarah who works as a nurse at the local hospital. She's kind and practical, and genuinely seems to enjoy spending time with Oliver. And with me, last month, Oliver started preschool. I was there on his first day, standing beside Derek as we watched him walk through those doors, waving goodbye with a confidence that made my heart swell. Thanks, Dad, Derek said. For what? For not giving up. On me. On Oliver. Even when I gave you every reason to. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The truth is, there were moments when I wanted to give up, when the exclusion and the theft and the threats felt like too much to bear, when I wondered if fighting back was worth the cost. But then I would think about Oliver, about his smile, about his laugh, about the chance to be part of his life, to teach him the things my father taught me, to give him the kind of unconditional love that every child deserves. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting. It's believing you deserve to win. I learned that the relationship between a grandparent and grandchild isn't a privilege someone else gets to grant or revoke. It's a right worth protecting, even when protecting it means standing up to people who are supposed to be family. I'm 66 now. My house is still small. My truck is still old. But I'm rich in ways that matter. I have my son back. I have my grandson. I have the knowledge that when it mattered most, I refused to be treated as less than I deserved. And I have hope for the future. Oliver asked me the other day why I have so many pictures of Grandma Margaret on my walls. I told him about his grandmother, about how much she would have loved him, about how she used to say that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about showing up for the people you love. Like you show up for me, Grandpa? He asked. Exactly like that, buddy. Exactly like that. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to rebuild the family you almost lost. I got that chance. And I'm grateful for it every single day. Now I'm curious about you who are listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever had to fight to stay connected to someone you love? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.